Welcome to Remotely Interested, the podcast where we talk remote working, work life in general, and top tips to successfully work from anywhere. Today we'll hear from Tim Grillon, founder of tailoredguidance.com. Tim is an experienced science teacher and public speaking coach who has been working remotely since September 2016 with clients across 3 different continents. He has been an expert in delivering highly engaging presentations remotely long before the pandemic forced us all online, and has a natural talent for communicating enthusiastically with others, both in person and remotely, having done so in, last count, 5 different languages. Full disclosure, Tim is my husband. We share a life and an office, and Tim was certainly an important motivator and cheerleader for me when I began remote working. So it made perfect sense for Tim to be my first guest. Tim, welcome to the Remotely Interested podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you for accepting to be our first guest. So, can I invite you to speak a little bit about your work, your experience, and how in particular remote working has been a feature in your work?
Yeah, so originally I'm a teacher. I started teaching science, and particularly chemistry, as soon as I got out of university. I was, like any other teacher, working in a school and doing my 9 to 5, well, more like my 8 to 6. And then after a while, we decided to do something a bit different and change our lives a little bit. And we moved away from a very big city to countryside, and I was struggling to find what I thought would be easy to find, which is, substitute work. I thought that I'd be getting a lot of substitute work, and it turned out that I wasn't. Schools, I applied for a lot of different jobs. I sent hundreds of applications as a substitute work, not to get permanent work, as a substitute. And I realized that a lot of schools are stuck in their ways, and they just want to deal with the agencies, and they don't want to deal with the teacher. It's the teacher themselves, and so they weren't calling me back, even though I know most of these schools make use of substitute teacher on a regular basis, perhaps every day. When you have a big school with 50 teachers, you've got to have one every day at least that's ill. So I thought that they would be calling me back, but they weren't. So I wasn't able to find substitute work very easily. I was only getting called once in a while, which obviously wasn't enough to provide. And so in the end, I got, working online wasn't in my radar at all, But a friend of ours called me up. We had a conversation, and she said, look, my daughter is in an online school, and I don't know if they're looking for anyone, but they might do. So if you want, I'll give you the head teacher's phone number or email. She gave me the email, and I said, yeah, okay, well, why not? I'll try it. And so there wasn't any job on the website. It seemed that they were fully booked, as it were, for jobs. So I decided to just send an email, exactly like I did for any other school that I'd sent a CV to, saying, here, I'm offering my services as a substitute teacher if you need it. And didn't hear anything, sort of forgot about it. But it didn't take very long, maybe 2-3 weeks later, the head teacher got back to me and said, well, actually, yeah, we're looking for a regular sub, so if you want to work for us. And that's how it started. That's how I started my online work. They started calling me on a regular basis, giving me classes to sub for, and all of that from the comfort of my own home. So that's how the whole online thing started.
Excellent, thank you. So just to recap then, you had experience as a classroom teacher in various different schools, and then you moved from that to more flexible working as a supply or substitute teacher in an online school. So you went drastically from in-person to remote 100%. Is that correct?
Yeah, no experience of online. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And since then, how has your remote work developed?
Well, I worked for that school for a while. They then gave me a permanent job. And I realized sort of working as a supply teacher, being able to accept some work and reject some according to my availabilities, really suited me very well. And so when they gave me a permanent job with permanent classes, although it worked out for a while, I realized that that's not what I wanted. I also wanted the flexibility on top of being able to work from home. I also wanted to be able to decide my timetable, to decide when I was going to work, when I was going to accept work and reject it. So I decided that I quit. I quit my job. Luckily, I had a very supportive wife who was earning enough for the both of us at the time. So
This
I was able to
quit. Scripted, by the way. This isn't scripted. Just want everybody to know.
Yes. So yeah, I was very. I had the chance of being able to quit my job, and for a while I've been wanting to do something else. I tried different things, and now I'm all on my own. Trying to. At first, I started to do mainly some tutoring work, and it was difficult at first because you had to find the work. You had to again send CV to agencies, and at first you go through agencies and take a big chunk of your salary, but then word to mouth, and you end up finding work on your own, and you get to take all the cash home, which is good. And that also gave me a flexibility to work on side projects. I've always wanted to do more on my training as a public speaker, and so slowly I was able to diversify. I even did some bookkeeping work for a while. I did some admin work. I tried it all just so I could. Really, the idea was just to stay online and to stay flexible, really. And that was my priority, which did mean that for a while I had to sort of lower my rates a little bit, my hourly rates, and it did mean that I had to make other sacrifices. But what was so important to me was, working from home and being flexible. So I had to make a sacrifice somewhere else. And so eventually I was able to spend more time with my public speaking coaching business, and that's slowly picking up. And meanwhile, I'm still, doing some tutoring, and my rates keep going up, not because I keep taking my rates up, but on average, because I'm managing to keep the middleman out of the way, the agencies, managing to find the work on my own. It's allowing me to take all of the money home, and it's doing better and better. So that's great.
Okay, so second recap then, because obviously with that online school, you did have a permanent role there for some years.
Yeah.
There was some stability there, which gave you significant experience in teaching in that remote capacity. And then obviously that was a springboard to pursue other avenues, like you said, the tutoring and the public speaking. We'll come to the public speaking a bit later, but I just want you to let us know about how you consider time zone when you're booking tutoring sessions with your students, because that's quite interesting, I think, the way you go about that to maintain your flexibility, but also to be available for those in different countries.
Sure. So yeah, so that's the beauty of online work. So at first you sort of think, when I started tutoring one-on-one in person, obviously most of my work was after school, right? Because I could only work wherever my car took me.
Sure.
And so I've done that for many years, and I would go to pupil school, and I, would drive maybe 20 miles max to go to a pupil's house. But then knowing that I wanted to make this sort of my permanent work, I needed to do more than work from like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon to 6, 7 o'clock, or even 8 o'clock sometimes. One, because it's tiring to work that late, but also because it's not very convenient to have all your evenings taken in the week. So eventually, from working online and from having a bit of a alternative lifestyle for a while, from traveling a lot, I realized that time zones can work in my favor, and so now we're on a specific time zone. We're in Europe. So I do have still some pupil in the evening, but what I try and do is I try and work with Asian countries, so pupils in Asian countries in the morning, because it's the evening for them. And then I will try and work with the Middle East. And so I have quite a few people in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, in all these countries in the Middle East in the afternoon. And then in the evening, then I can have people who are closer to my time zone, like most countries in Europe that are sort of GMT +1, +2. And so I managed to get work that usually you would only associate that type of work for after school. But in the end, it's a job that I managed to do all day long. And because I'm online and because I'm now not restricted to having to, drive my car around in my local neighborhood, basically.
Yeah, excellent. That's great. So your decision to really pursue remote work and make sacrifices at certain points, in order to continue that really has paid off, isn't it? It's enabled you to diversify in terms of who your clients are, and then diversify the work itself, So to recap again, teaching, tutoring, administration. I know you support a few consultants, again, in different countries on an administrative level, and also your public speaking consultancy that you've started recently, website as well that we'll show on here. So again, in terms of the public speaking, how would you say that ties in with this new way of working, the work from anywhere, future of work way of working that's really developing now?
Well, I'm counting on the fact that people are less and less reluctant to be working online, of course. And I'm also counting on the fact that there are many people now that are having to do a lot of their meetings online. Okay, more and more nowadays, people are realizing that you don't necessarily have to tie yourself down to the office meeting room to be able to have a discussion. It has its place, of course, the office meeting room. It can be really nice to have everybody in the same room for various reasons. But many people are realizing that there's also extremely convenient, especially when you have big companies that have employees that have to travel a lot, and yet they still have to have group discussions. And these group discussions have to be led both in a way that is engaging, but also in a way that is efficient. And so I think in this world, I'm trying to make my way in there and to help people to do that. I have a lot of experience in trying to engage people in the digital world online. It's not easy. A lot of people don't like to not be in person, but they don't realize how effective it can sometimes be. A lot of the things we do now are via a screen.
Sure,
we do a lot of our learning from screen. And the idea that we learn, but we can also teach, and we can also coach, and we can also help in various ways, despite the distances. And the world is a big place, but it's a smaller and smaller place with all the technologies that we have. And I think making the best of them, and that's what I'm trying to do, is to help people make the best of these tools and sort of overcome the idea that it's not going to be as nice, it's not going to be as good a presentation or as good a meeting if we are having to do it via an online screen or a video conference tool of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said there reminded me as well. Obviously, we all prefer to have a variety of interactions, remote, online as well as in person. But if we think back to the pandemic, we were in Thailand during most of that period, and we literally did everything via screen, work, socializing with friends, calling back home, speaking with our families. It did become a very remote life. And although it was restrictive, we were still able to function and maintain those relationships with others, wasn't it? So it certainly is an important tool that can be used, within, of course, in-person life, which must continue as well, because we've got to be balanced. But I agree with you that it shouldn't automatically be viewed as negative or even a second-class way of communicating or of achieving something.
Yeah. And I think the pandemic, as you said, has had it has had positives because people have had to think outside the box, and think, how am I going to overcome this? I still need to earn some money, and I still need to work, and they've had to use new tools. On the other hand, though, I think it also had the effect of sort of forcing people to do something that they weren't prepared to do. And I know, for example, there's a lot of teachers that thought, all right, that's it. I know I've got like 5-6 years before my retirement, but I'm actually going to start retiring now, because it was too brutal for them to suddenly have to do everything online. And they really struggled with that. And I think it made some people weary of that technology, and they really they're fighting it off now. And I think instead of having to choose one or the other, it's what I think is better to do is to be comfortable with both and see the limitations of both and see the advantages of both, and therefore make the better choice of which technology or which setup you want for that situation or for this situation. And I think next time, I'm hoping, of course, that there's not going to be another pandemic. But if it is the case, and if we do have to spend sometimes times at home because, there's a virus out there that we don't want to be in contact with, then at least we already have the tools. We know what it's good for. We know how to use it. And people, I'm hoping, won't be as afraid to use it as they did before. I know a lot of teachers like that, they sort of gave, and I can't blame them. You suddenly have this classroom with all the people in front of you, and you're teaching, and they're responding directly, and it's so much more easier. And suddenly you're sitting in front of a screen with like 30 no video little boxes where you can't see any of them, and you still have to show the same enthusiasm, you still have to show the same engagement. And that's very difficult, but it's possible. I've done it for quite many years outside of the pandemic, and I think if people see the benefits of it, it's a lot better. Yeah, of course.
Exactly. I think that's an excellent point as well. Reviewing the way you're going to interact on a case-by-case basis, because like you say, some situations will lend itself to remote communication, some won't. Maybe we can now summarize. What would you say are the positive aspects of remote working?
I think one of the major ones is flexibility. Flexibility of being able to decide when you're going to work, when you're going to finish, being so close to your home, i.e. being in your own home, is extremely advantageous for many reasons. It saves, for all those of you out there who are wanting to save money, it saves a ton of money because especially if you live in towns like London or areas where the traffic is bad, or even if you're in the countryside and you're having to travel like 40-50 miles to get to your job, it saves a lot of petrol, it saves a lot of time consuming. We used to be Londoners, didn't we? And just to get to work would take us an hour and a half of having to be sat next to loads of people squashed into a tube. And when the highlight of your day was basically finding a seat on the tube, basically. So that you can say goodbye to that. And that is a major factor. I understand that some people struggle with motivating themselves when they're at home and they have no boss to look over their shoulder. I understand that's not an advantage, but really, I think that if you take it seriously, the advantage is that it really helps you to be more disciplined with yourself. And there's a lot of bosses out there that are afraid of letting their staff working from home because they can't micromanage them and they can't have control over them, and they're afraid of losing that control. But I feel like you are much more likely to be efficient when you haven't spent an hour and a half in the transport, when you're not going to have to spend an hour and a half after work as well. You're a lot fresher when you get to I can wake up in the morning and then go straight to my desk and start working. And to be fair, like the time of the day when you're the most aware, the fresher, if I can put it this way, is when you're usually in the tube, walking to the tube, traveling to your workplace. And all that time, you're actually doing some work at home. You're using that moment of the day where you're actually the most efficient, and you're making the most of it. And also, sometimes you have bursts of energy at the end of the day, and you don't want to slow your momentum. And so you're like, okay, I'll just work for an hour. And it's not an awful thing to do, because basically, even when you're finished after that extra hour of work, if you did that at your office, it's an extra hour of work, and then you have to then travel back home and feel miserable about it. But when you're at home, you're doing that extra hour of work because you've got the momentum. And when you're finished, you're at home, and then you can sit in your sofa and you can have a bit of food to eat and go straight to bed if you want. But whatever the case may be, it saves a ton of energy and a ton of money.
Really nice point. Yeah. That actually you end up being more productive if you work from home, because you're not having to factor in that journey. And you're right, perhaps you would, that burst at the end of the day would end up being wasted, because rightly so, you just want to get home. You think, okay, I'm sorry, that will have to wait till tomorrow. I want to prioritize being back home with my family, which is fair enough. But everybody loses out, because you've still got that work to do the next day, and you still have that journey where you lose momentum and you lose that energy that could have been otherwise used. Excellent. Okay, well, you mentioned a little bit about motivation. Some people are worried that they lack the motivation in order to work from home. Can you think of any other potential negative aspects of remote working?
I mean, to be fair, it's difficult, but yeah, I think the major one is to be disciplined. Yeah, you have to be disciplined. That's really important. You have to make sure that you don't waste time, and you make the most of being at home. Having said that, the second major point that is difficult is to switch off. So to really separate your work life from your home life, because really, essentially, when you work from home, then your office is just there in the corner of your eye.
It's possible to dip in perhaps more than you should, if you're not disciplined.
I was going to mention, like, if you the money you're saving on petrol and time and energy, like, if you wouldn't mind putting that back a little bit on rent, so you can have a room dedicated to working from home, so that you can close the door and sort of put an end to the day of the working day, it is a good thing. Having said that, it is always there. You always have the possibility of just popping into work, and so you want to make sure that you are disciplined with that as well, because it's there Sundays as well, it's there Saturdays, it's there in the evenings, it's there all the time. And sometimes if it's your own business as well, and you really feel like you could make a difference by working an extra Saturday or an extra Sunday, and the office is just right there, it's so easy to just get to work at a time where you should probably do something else, even if it's just resting. So I think that's the major point. It takes time to be able to accept that it's not because that you can work that you should work. So after a while, though, that becomes no more of a problem than everything else.
Okay, I mean, that's my next question. How do you think you can overcome that challenge of keeping work in its place?
To be fair, it's like most jobs. I mean, I'm going to talk as a teacher, but as a teacher, there can always be more work. There's never, and I think that's most work. So I'm just talking as a teacher, but I think it's most work. You can always find something else to do, right? And so, just like any other work, you have to discipline yourself at some point and say, look, yes, I could do this. And you could think, yes, I could do this so I don't have to do it on Monday. But the reality is, maybe you've done it now so you don't have to do it Monday, but you'll have something else to do on Monday. So you have to use the same discipline that you would any other job, and think, this is what I can do now. I have a life outside of this. Use a timetable if you can, of hours where you've said, I'm going to work. It's a little bit easier for me because my work consists of a lot of sort of hour sections of coaching or teaching. And so it's a bit easier for me, but I also have other tasks, and I also place hours in the week where I will do those tasks. Having said that, you can still keep flexibility around it. And if you haven't managed to do them during those times, you can easily move them along. So it doesn't take away too much from the flexibility, but it is nice to have a set timetable that you can rely on. And then if things change in your life, you can then move that timetable around as necessary. But most of the time, it works to have a nice timetable where you know which task you're going to do when.
Yeah.
So perhaps sitting down on a Friday night, or sitting down. I mean, it's probably not a good example, but I like to do it Sunday night. Sitting down on Sunday night and writing down what am I going to do each day, and just reviewing the calendar. It doesn't take me very long, like half an hour. And I actually get sleep better on Sunday night because I feel like I know what I'm going to do and I'm prepared for it.
Yeah, excellent. So scheduling, timetabling, planning, and then of course respecting that plan, because that's the thing not to forget, isn't it? That when we're planning to work, we're also planning the times that we're not working, and that's doing us a favor. So yeah, exactly. Okay, excellent. So over the years, obviously, you must have collaborated and worked with a lot of different clients remotely. So for those who are contemplating making the jump to remote working, what advice would you give in terms of the general behavior and work style that you find appealing when you're working with somebody else, that would encourage you to work with them and perhaps pursue more contracts? What is the style that would make somebody successful in remote working?
I think more than in-person working, I would say being polite, being on time, and being professional. Okay, it's going to sound silly, but when you have a meeting in person, like I'm talking about in a school, okay, you said to a teacher, okay, we're going to have a meeting at like after school, 4 p.m. We're all meeting in that classroom. And of course, most teachers will sort of trickle in. One will come at 5:05, one will come at 5:10, 4:05 and 4:10. But when you arrive and you see 4:01, 4:02, 4:03, and still no one's there, you don't start panicking. The whole school is full of teachers, and you can usually reach out to them and drag them out of their classroom and say, look, we said 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case for most offices. You can sort of drag people and say, look, we said that time. But when you're sat there in front of your Zoom at 4:00 and you're facing the emptiness of the internet and nobody's there, and in 4:01, 4:02, 4:03, it's a lot more anxiety inducing. And it's going to sound a little bit unfair, but it seems even more unprofessional. It's a lot harder to wait, and therefore you feel like it's worse. So you feel like the person is even more unprofessional than usual. So punctuality, one, that's a big thing. Okay. Then because you tend to send a lot more emails, you tend to communicate a lot more that way through chats and things like that. Again, keep it professional. Choose your time to start using emojis. Some people sort of go emoji full on during the first email, but the reality is, if you learn to know your clients, if you learn to know who you're working with, maybe after a while you can sort of create an atmosphere where that becomes okay, and you can sort of joke around and start putting emojis into your emails because you've now built a sort of most friendship with them. But at first, try and keep it as structured as possible. Keep your emails polite, keep them professional. I think that's really important. Another thing is, put your camera on. I cannot stress this point enough. Yeah. There is nothing more unprofessional than somebody putting the camera off, because it's like anything. You said something. You said, you know, when you haven't heard what somebody said, and the person says, "Oh no, don't worry, it's nothing." You start imagining the worst. You start imagining they've just said something incredibly rude or horrible, and the more you ask them, "But what did you say?" and the more they say, "No, it doesn't matter." The more you imagine that it's, you know, something awful has been said. And it's the same when you're talking to someone who doesn't want to put the camera on. It's like, why don't they want to put the camera on? You know. The only reason why is because they haven't cleaned their room, they haven't cleaned their themselves, they haven't cleaned their office, they haven't put their, you know, still in their pajamas, and that's not very professional as far as I'm concerned. So I think people that I like to continue to work with are people that put their cameras on, and you can see where they are. You can see that they've actually prepared themselves for that meeting or for whatever you're about to talk about. And it makes it so much easier to talk face to face, as it were, and to actually speak to them. So yeah, I would say that professional, punctual, and put your camera on.
Yeah, excellent. I think you've raised some really important points here that I think we're going to discuss again and again in terms of being professional. Because what you were saying about the emoji and the way that you communicate via email, it's a really difficult balance to find, because I think sometimes I've found in my experience, I receive emails signed off with kisses from people that I've never met. Now, we all have our own style.
Do I need to worry?
We all have our own communication style, but I think there is a definite desire to develop a closeness when you do work remotely, and that makes certain people express things in text that perhaps, well, certainly I don't think I'd be kissed, you know, every day or every time I achieve something in the office, you know, I don't think I'd be greeted with a kiss. So there is that desire to build that rapport, but I totally agree with you that we want to remain professional as well. It is still a professional relationship, but I think that is something that's changing with each generation as well.
Yeah,
because those from whom I receive messages regularly with kisses tend to be younger than me. So I think it's a generation.
I definitely need to worry then.
And I'm showing my age. No, you don't need to worry.
Okay. Yeah, and I would say one more thing about this idea that you would tend to do things on text or email that you wouldn't do in person.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason why people used to confess to the priest, and the priest used to have this barrier, you know, because when you can't see the priest, it's easier to open your heart and say whatever it is you have done. And I think it's the same when you're on email. You can't actually see the person, and you will always tend to be more open about your feelings, about, you know, speaking from the heart when you're texting or emailing. And I think that's also true. I'd love to talk to a psychiatrist about it, because I think a lot of psychiatrists these days are doing online sessions as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if people open up more because they're doing it through like a video conference. I mean, because they're in the comfort of their own home and they're a bit more relaxed. And, you know, it's the whole couch thing. You know, you used to sit them on the couch to make them comfortable. Now they're actually in their bed in their hoodie, you know, so people are more comfortable speaking that way. And I think that's great. Okay. It can bring something to the table, but you need to think, if I were in person, like, would I be behaving that way? Would I be writing this? Would I be saying this? And would I be conducting myself in that way? And if not, then perhaps, you know, maybe review the way you're doing things.
Yeah, I really agree with that when it comes to putting the camera on, because of course we're talking about the advantages of remote work. Sometimes that advantage can even be that we're not very well, but we can still work from home, because at least we haven't got that journey that would make us even more tired and perhaps incapable of performing our job. But the advantage of remote work shouldn't be used to be unprofessional. Putting a camera on during a meeting seems like a minimum you should be offering whoever's going to be engaging with you. So, well, you've started something there, Tim. Be polite, punctual, and professional. The 3 Ps.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I think it's going to be
a
a
thing.
thing.
It for free.
Oh, thank you. That's kind of you. Okay. Okay, right. So to end our session, we now have a randomly chosen question. Now, this is the podcast about remote working, work life in general, and top tips to successfully work from anywhere. You've certainly provided a lot of that already, Tim, so thank you. So I'm now going to pick a question from the Mosaic Gold plate.
Okay.
And this will reveal some more interesting information for our listeners. Okay. So it's completely random. So here we go.
Okay.
It's just a very high-tech method, as you see. Printed. Oh, okay. So if you were school age again, which 3 subjects would you focus on more closely than you perhaps did?
Ooh. Okay. I would tend to say all of them really, but school age 3 subjects that I would. So I started in A-level IT, like computer science, and I quit after 3 months, and I regret that, I have to say. So I think I wish I'd continued learning more about programming, and I'd be more efficient at it today. I regret having done that. So I guess I regret that. I guess okay. So you may have heard that already, but I am French, so I went to a French school, obviously, and my main language at the time was French, and so I regret not having be more patient with French. I gave up quite quickly. I felt that I kept saying, I'm never going to write a book, and today I would love to be able to have the skills to write a book, in French, and the grammar is very complicated, and I think I didn't see the advantage of actually being able to write properly, to write professionally. I talked about professionalism when you write emails, but that's super important. You knowing how to use the right tone, how to know the conventions of writing a proper email. I really struggled with that throughout my professional life, and you can't tell you how many times I've Googled, how should I start an email for that kind of person or this kind of person? How should I conclude an email when I'm talking to a colleague or when I'm talking to the boss? So I wished I'd listened a bit more about that when in French school. There's a lot of convention, especially in French, about how you should speak and how you should write. So I wish I'd listened a bit more. And I wish I'd been a bit better at PE, if I'm honest. I love sport. I love watching sport, but I do too much watching and not enough doing. So I wish that, and when you work from home, it's a bit dangerous to not be active outside and to not have a sports routine, a weekly sports routine. So I wish that I'd taken on a sport that I would still practice today. And PE. I wish I'd been more PE savvy in those days.
Okay. Oh, well, it's not too late. You know where the gym is.
I knew that was gonna come back to me. Yeah.
Okay. And there's a second part to this question. You talked about traditional school subjects, but thinking about working life now, or even just social life, if there was a subject that could be introduced to the school syllabus that you think could be useful now, if you could have started something at 11, say, what subject or skill would that be?
I know there are things that are similar to that, and being a teacher, I've had the opportunity to observe quite a few English lessons. But I would say more needs to be done about speaking publicly, about being a confident speaker. More needs to be done, because it's not just a skill about knowing how to speak. It's also knowing how to conduct yourself, knowing how to feel about yourself in a social setting, knowing how it is okay to know certain things and not know other things, being okay with yourself, knowing that you can do this and you can't do that. It's okay to be vulnerable in front of others, even sometimes strangers. These are skills that are super important when you grow up, especially when you're a teenager. And if you're able to learn them through the public speaking, I know we used to do lots of presentations at school, and I know that was in a way public speaking, but the focus was on the content and what you would say and how much research you had done. But if the focus was also on the delivery, on the way you delivered the information when you did those presentations, I think that would be a huge step forward for how pupils view school and how they actually use what they learned during their school years.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's great. Well, that leads nicely into just our concluding part now. You're a busy guy. You've already explained that you're working in a few different areas. So where can people find you and what do you have to offer if they do find you?
All right. So my website is tailoredguidance.com, and I have a YouTube channel, and I have a TikTok channel, I have an Instagram channel. You can find all of them on my website. I would say if you are looking for little tips, I have on my channel, I have videos that sort of explain very important concepts to be decent public speaker without having gone to some sort of debating school or anything like that. If you're like me and basically you've learned nothing about public speaking through school, but you're finding yourself in a professional setting now or at school and having to do presentations without any training, then that's, it's a channel that could be useful to you. So I encourage you to go to my channel, Tailored Guidance, on YouTube, and find my little 5 minutes or less videos where I give tips on how you can easily improve your skills. And if you want a longer format, then I have a course on Udemy. Once again, the course is available. You can find the link on tailoredguidance.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tim. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
So it was interesting to see in Tim's case that prioritising remote work enabled him to remain flexible and also diversify in terms of the clients he works with and the type of work he does. We saw that remote working cuts costs and enables us to not waste time on commuting. And we also have the chance to make the most of the times in the morning or in the evening when we may have energy bursts and when we can genuinely work when we're at our best. And of course, it's important to stay motivated and disciplined. And as we saw, be aware of the 3 Ps in order to be a successful and sought after remote worker. So, if you're even remotely interested in remote working, I'll see you next time.